The alien queen feared betrayal until she found her daughters with a human. The alien queen, sovereign of the Zalran Empire, was both revered and feared. Her empire spanned several star systems, her power unmatched by any other force in the galaxy. She was not only a queen but a living legend. Her every command followed without question, her every word a decree that shaped the very fabric of her people's existence. But beneath the surface of her iron rule, there was a secret she guarded closely, one that no one, not even her closest advisors, fully understood. For years, the queen had lived with the constant fear of betrayal. It was not that she did not trust those closest to her. It was that her mind could not escape the thought that at any moment, someone could undermine her, plotting in the shadows, ready to strike when she was most vulnerable. The very idea that someone could challenge her reign gnawed at her soul. This fear had shaped her into the ruler she had become, ruthless, calculating, and always 10 steps ahead of her enemies. Yet, as the years passed, the fear only grew stronger, and with it, her isolation. Her daughters, the heirs to her throne, had always been her greatest source of pride and concern. They were young, beautiful, and full of promise, but the queen could not help but see in them the potential for betrayal. It was not their ambition that worried her, it was the influence of others. The queen had seen how the galaxy was changing, how new powers were rising in distant star systems, and how these powers could easily manipulate the hearts and minds of her daughters. She could not afford to let that happen. They had to be kept close under her watchful eye, for only she knew what was best for them, and for the Empire. One evening, as the queen sat upon her throne, gazing out across the vast expanse of her empire, a voice broke the silence. It was her most trusted advisor, Arlen, a man who had served her for decades, and whose loyalty she had never questioned. But tonight, there was something in his tone that unsettled her. "My queen," Arlen began, bowing deeply, "there is a matter that requires your immediate attention." The queen turned her gaze upon him, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Speak, Arlen, what is it?" Arlen hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There are whispers, my queen. Whispers of a human, an outsider, a foreigner who is gaining influence within our empire. He is building a network unseen, unnoticed, but growing nonetheless. Some believe that he is more than he appears." The queen's heart skipped a beat. Humans. They had always been a curiosity to her, their race scattered across the stars, struggling to survive in a galaxy that was not their own. She had never paid them much attention, seeing them as nothing more than a primitive species. But the thought that one of them could pose a threat to her empire, a human of all beings, was almost laughable. And yet something in Arlen's voice made her take the matter seriously. "How did this human come to be in our empire?" the queen asked, her voice cold and commanding. Arlen explained, "He is a wanderer, a traveler from distant worlds. He came to our empire seeking asylum, and in his time here he has made allies, secretly, quietly. His words are persuasive, his ideas unconventional. And now he is gaining followers, many of whom are from influential families and sectors of society." The queen's mind raced. If what Arlen was saying was true, this human could be a threat. But why now? Why, after so many years of peace and stability, had a human decided to disrupt her empire? The answer was not immediately clear, but one thing was certain. The queen could not afford to let this threat grow unchecked. "Do you know who this human is?" she asked, her tone sharp. Arlen nodded. "His name is Kale. He is a man of remarkable intelligence, skilled in negotiation and strategy. Some say he speaks with a wisdom beyond his years. Others claim he possesses knowledge that could change the balance of power in the galaxy." The queen leaned back in her throne, her thoughts churning. She had heard of Kale before, but only in passing. A human with such power? It was unthinkable, yet the queen knew better than to dismiss such a possibility. If he was truly gaining influence, then her daughters, too, could be at risk. She had to act quickly before things spiraled out of control. "Find him," the queen ordered, her voice like ice. "Bring him to me. I will see for myself what this human is capable of." Arlen bowed and left without a word, leaving the queen alone with her thoughts. Her fear of betrayal was now personal. She had no room for weakness, especially when her daughters were involved. She had built her empire on strength and control, and she would not let a human, no matter how persuasive, bring it all crashing down. The queen's thoughts turned to her daughters, the two most important people in her life. She had raised them with love, but also with an iron grip, teaching them to rule with strength and conviction. They were everything to her, and she would do anything to protect them, even if it meant making difficult choices. They had always been sheltered, kept in the palace away from the intrigues of the empire, but now it seemed the time had come to change that. She knew her daughters were curious, restless. They had been asking questions, wondering what lay beyond the palace walls. They had started to form relationships with people outside of her influence, something the queen had always forbidden. She had kept them close, always ensuring they were protected from the dangers of the world, but now she feared that her control was slipping. Could it be that one of her daughters had already met this human, Kale? Could they be falling under his spell as many others had? The queen stood, her mind made up. She would not wait for Kale to come to her. She would find him first. She would confront him and make sure that he posed no threat to her empire, her family, or the future she had built. She would not allow herself to be betrayed, not by him, and certainly not by her daughters. With a final glance at the stars beyond her throne room, the queen left the chamber, her resolve hardening. She would find the answers she needed, no matter the cost. The queen's heart raced with a new sense of urgency. There was no turning back now. She had given her orders, and soon she would meet Kale face to face. The idea of confronting him, the man who had gained so much power so quickly, filled her with a strange mixture of curiosity and dread. He was only a human after all, a race she had never considered a threat. Yet somehow he had managed to penetrate the core of her empire without anyone noticing. As she made her way to the command center of her palace, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. She had spent years keeping her enemies at bay by trusting her senses. Now, her instincts told her that something far bigger than a single human was at play. The human had been the catalyst, but something deeper was at work, something that could topple her empire if left unchecked. Her daughters were still fresh in her thoughts. She had raised them to be strong, to understand the weight of the crown they would one day inherit. Yet she had never once considered the possibility that they might seek out someone from outside their world, a human, no less, and trust him. Could they have been so easily swayed? Had they grown to question the foundation of their rule? Her thoughts were interrupted as Arlen entered the room, his presence as steady and reassuring as ever. But today his expression was different. There was something in his eyes, something guarded, cautious. "My queen," he said, bowing deeply. "The human has been located." The queen's breath hitched. "Where?" "He's at the northern border of the capital in the old district, the one place no one dares to go." The queen's eyes narrowed. The old district was a forgotten part of the city, a place where the poor and downtrodden had been pushed into exile long ago. A place where criminals, outcasts, and rebels thrived. It made sense that Kale would be there. If he were trying to build a network, there would be no better place to do it, hidden away from the royal gaze. "Prepare the soldiers," the queen ordered. "We leave at once." Arlen hesitated, but only for a moment. "My queen, may I suggest a different approach?" he asked, his voice careful. "Perhaps a less direct method would be better. We don't want to alert him to our presence." The queen's eyes flicked to Arlen, her expression hardening. "I will deal with him in my own way, Arlen. I trust you to handle the soldiers. Do not question my command again." Arlen bowed and left the room quickly. The queen could feel his hesitation, his doubt, but it didn't matter. She couldn't afford to show weakness. She couldn't afford to show fear, not to her subjects, and especially not to the human who had dared to challenge her authority. The journey to the old district was quiet. The streets were empty, save for the occasional figure lurking in the shadows, always watching but never approaching. As the queen's procession moved deeper into the district, the air grew thick with the scent of decay and neglect. The buildings here were old, crumbling, and forgotten by time. The people who lived here were the ones who had nothing left, no hope, no future. The queen had always seen this place as a blight on her empire, a reminder of the things she had conquered and controlled. But now, as she walked through the alleys and narrow streets, she felt something else, something she had never expected. She felt out of place. She had always been the one in control, the one who commanded fear and respect. But here, in the old district, the air was thick with defiance. The people who lived here were survivors, forced to live in the shadows of a world they had been cast out of. They were not afraid of her, and that realization unnerved her more than she cared to admit. They reached the center of the district, a large, open space where a few scattered buildings stood, abandoned but still standing. The queen's heart raced as she spotted a small group of people gathered around a fire in the center. The moment her eyes fell on them, she knew Kale was among them. The human was tall, with dark, unruly hair that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with an unsettling calmness that contrasted with the chaotic surroundings. He didn't look like someone who was trying to build an army or overthrow an empire. In fact, he looked almost peaceful. He was sitting in front of a woman, speaking quietly to her. The queen couldn't hear what he was saying, but there was something in his body language that made her pause. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. He wasn't like the generals or commanders she was used to, loud, brash, and eager for power. No, Kale was different. He didn't seem to need to command respect. He didn't seem to care about it at all. The queen's thoughts were interrupted as Kale looked up, his gaze meeting hers with surprising clarity. For a moment, the queen felt as though the world had shifted. His eyes were calm, yet there was a fire in them, something that made her uneasy, something that she couldn't quite place. "You're here," he said, his voice carrying across the empty space. "I was wondering when you would show up." The queen's jaw clenched. "You have no right to be here, human," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You are disrupting the natural order of things. You are a threat to my empire." Kale smiled, the expression not one of arrogance but of understanding. "No," he said softly. "I'm not a threat to your empire. I'm offering you a chance to change, a chance to see beyond your fears." The queen's heart pounded in her chest. His words felt like a challenge, but they also felt like an invitation to something she hadn't expected, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "Why should I listen to you?" the queen demanded, her tone sharp. "What could a human possibly know about ruling an empire?" Kale stood slowly, his movements deliberate and graceful. "I know about ruling, my queen," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I also know that power built on fear is fragile. I've seen it crumble. I've watched empires fall because their leaders were too afraid to let go of control." The queen felt a flicker of doubt, a strange unease settling in her chest. Was he right? Could it be that the very foundation of her empire, the foundation built on fear and dominance, was beginning to crack? She had spent so long protecting her rule, her daughters, her people from betrayal. But what if she had been the one who had been blind to the truth all along? For the first time in years, the queen didn't have the answers, and that terrified her. The queen stood frozen for a moment, her mind reeling from Kale's words. Her eyes narrowed as she studied him more closely, trying to discern any hint of deception. But there was nothing in his expression that suggested manipulation. His calm demeanor, the ease with which he spoke, only made her more uncertain. This was not the kind of man she was used to confronting. There was no arrogance in his stance, no sense of superiority, only a quiet strength, almost as if he knew something she didn't. "You speak of fear and control," the queen said, her voice low, filled with doubt she wasn't ready to admit. "But what you fail to understand is that fear is what keeps an empire standing. Without fear, there is chaos." Kale didn't flinch at her words. "Fear can keep things standing, yes, but it also keeps them from growing. You've built an empire that is solid, no doubt, but it's built on the foundation of a cage. You've trapped your people in it, and no one ever stays in a cage forever." The queen's heart tightened. She was used to being in control of every situation, used to having people bow to her authority. But here, in the presence of this human, she felt a sense of vulnerability she had never experienced before. It was as though Kale was peeling away the layers of her carefully constructed armor, revealing the uncertainty she had buried deep inside for years. "You don't know my people," she said sharply, trying to regain control. "They need structure. They need a leader who can keep them in line, who can guide them. Without that, they will fall into anarchy." Kale smiled slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Maybe," he said, "but you have more power than you realize. You don't need to rule through fear. You could lead them with trust, with compassion. You could build something stronger than an empire. You could create a legacy." A legacy. The word echoed in the queen's mind. She had never thought about her rule in those terms. She had always focused on maintaining power, ensuring her daughters would inherit a strong, unchallenged empire. But a legacy? Was that what she was really leaving behind? The thought unsettled her, and she felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Kale's gaze softened as he took a step closer to her. "You're afraid of losing control, I understand, but control is not the same as power. True power comes from within, from the trust you build with those around you." The queen took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the faces of the people who had gathered around the fire. They watched her with curiosity, some with hope, others with skepticism. For the first time, she noticed how different they were from the people in her court. There was a sense of freedom in their eyes, a sense of rebellion but also of possibility. These were people who had nothing, yet they were not afraid, and they respected Kale. "What do you want from me, Kale?" she asked, her voice softer now but still guarded. "Why have you come here? What is it that you're offering?" Kale looked at her for a long moment as if weighing his words carefully. "I'm not offering you anything. I'm simply showing you that there's another way. You've built an empire of fear, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You can change it. You can choose to lead with trust instead of fear. You can choose to break the chains that bind your people." The queen's heart raced. She had always believed that her empire, her rule, was the only way. She had never questioned the methods she used to keep her people in line, never considered that perhaps she was wrong. The thought that she might be wrong about everything was terrifying. It was a vulnerability she could not afford to acknowledge. But Kale was right about one thing. She was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of what might happen if she let go of the reins. "You speak of freedom," the queen said slowly, her voice steady, though her thoughts were anything but. "But freedom is a dangerous thing. It leads to chaos. You think I don't see what's happening around me? The rebellion simmering just beneath the surface. The whispers of revolt. You think I've built this empire on nothing?" "I never said you built it on nothing," Kale replied gently. "But your people don't fear you because they respect you. They fear you because they have no choice. That's not leadership, that's domination." The queen felt a sting in her chest, as though his words had pierced something deep inside her. She had always believed that domination was the only way to keep her people in line, to ensure they remained loyal. But now, standing before Kale, she wasn't so sure. The world she had created seemed to crumble in front of her, the cracks appearing one by one. She took a deep breath, fighting back the wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. She had spent her entire life building this empire, shaping it into something strong, something that could endure. To admit that it had been built on fear, that it had been a cage, was more than she could bear. Kale seemed to sense her internal struggle. He didn't push her. He simply waited, letting her process his words. The queen's eyes flicked to her daughters, standing at the edge of the crowd, watching her with uncertainty in their eyes. They had been raised to believe in her strength, in her ability to rule with absolute power. They had never seen her this way, unsure, vulnerable. What would they think of her if she admitted that everything she had built might be wrong? She turned back to Kale, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what you want from me, Kale. But if you think I can just let go of everything I've fought for, you're wrong." Kale's expression softened, and he took another step closer to her. "I don't want you to let go of everything. I just want you to see that there's another way. A way to build something even stronger than what you have now. It won't be easy, but it's possible." The queen looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time without the walls of fear and suspicion clouding her judgment. He was not like any of the leaders she had known. He was not like her, he was something new, something that challenged everything she had believed in. And in that moment she realized that he was right. She had been ruling with fear, yes, but that was no longer enough. If she was going to lead her people, if she was going to create a legacy, she would need to do more than just control them. She would need to build trust, to show them that they could follow her because they believed in her, not because they were forced to. For the first time in years, the queen felt the weight of her responsibility shift. She was no longer just the ruler of an empire. She was the leader of a people who could choose to follow her, not out of fear, but out of trust. And that, more than anything, terrified her. But she also knew that if she didn't take this chance, if she didn't listen to Kale, she would lose everything. Not just her empire, but her legacy, her daughters, her people. "Show me," she said, her voice filled with both fear and determination. "Show me this new way. But know this, if I do this, it will be on my terms. I will not be made a fool of." Kale nodded, his eyes filled with respect. "I would never ask you to, but together we can build something new, something that lasts." The queen nodded, the decision made. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time she was willing to find out. The queen's decision to trust Kale, to consider the possibility of change, weighed heavily on her. It felt as if she was stepping into the unknown, walking away from everything she had built her entire life around. For years, fear and control had been her guiding principles. She had believed that the only way to maintain power was through dominance, through a rigid rule that left no room for weakness or hesitation. But now, As she stood before Kale, her mind was filled with uncertainty, with questions she had never dared to ask before. Her daughters, who had been raised to believe in the unshakable strength of their mother's rule, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. They had always known her as a figure of unyielding authority, a queen who commanded respect and who never questioned her actions. To see her vulnerable, to see her in this moment of uncertainty, was something none of them had ever expected. "You don't have to do this, Mother," one of her daughters, Lyra, said quietly. She was the older of the two, strong-willed and sharp. Lyra had always been her mother's right hand, the one who understood the weight of the throne and the importance of preserving the Empire's power. "You've built this empire, it's strong, we've always been strong." The queen looked at her daughter, her heart aching. She could see the loyalty in her eyes, the desire to follow in her footsteps. But the world was changing. She had felt it for years now, the shifting of the balance of power, the rise of new forces, new ideas that threatened everything she had worked for. It wasn't just about maintaining control anymore. It was about survival. "I know, Lyra," the queen said softly, her voice filled with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "But sometimes strength isn't enough, and sometimes the very thing that keeps you safe is the thing that will destroy you." Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze to Kale, who stood quietly beside the queen, watching the exchange with a calmness that only seemed to make the queen's decision harder. Kale was offering something her empire had never known, something she had never thought possible. The idea that an empire could be built on trust, on mutual respect, was foreign to her, a concept that seemed as fragile as glass. As they walked through the district, the queen was more aware than ever of the lives around her. The people who lived in the old district were not afraid of her, and that fact gnawed at her. They had no fear of the crown, no respect for her power. They had nothing to lose, and in that there was freedom. It was something she had never fully understood. And now, as she moved deeper into the heart of this forgotten part of the city, she realized how much she had taken her own power for granted. Kale led them through the narrow streets, past the crumbling buildings and makeshift homes of the district's inhabitants. As they walked, he spoke to the people they passed, greeting them with a warmth that made the queen uneasy. They listened to him, nodded in agreement, and offered smiles that seemed genuine. It was something the queen had never seen before, a connection between leader and people that didn't rely on fear or control. "You see," Kale said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "This is what it could be like. A world where people follow you not because they fear you, but because they trust you." The queen didn't respond. She couldn't bring herself to say anything. Part of her wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that fear was the only thing that kept order, the only thing that prevented chaos from taking over. But there was another part of her, a part she had buried deep inside, that was beginning to believe him. Could it really be that simple? Could the empire be built on something other than fear? As they reached the center of the district, Kale stopped and turned to face the queen. "I know this is difficult for you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But I believe you can make a real difference. You have the power to change things, to build something new, but it won't happen unless you're willing to let go of the past." The queen looked at him, her chest tightening. She had spent so long holding on to everything she had built, so long ensuring that no one could challenge her. She had isolated herself from the world, from her people, because she believed it was the only way to protect them. But now, standing here in the heart of the district, she was beginning to see how much she had lost by clinging to power. "What if I fail?" she asked quietly, the words slipping from her lips before she could stop them. "What if everything I've worked for falls apart?" Kale's eyes softened. "You won't fail, not if you trust in yourself, not if you trust in your people." The queen's thoughts raced. She had never trusted anyone like this before, not even her daughters. She had always believed that trust was a weakness, a vulnerability that could be exploited. But Kale was right. If she wanted to build something lasting, something stronger than the empire she had known, she had to take a leap of faith. She had to trust. "We'll start small," the queen said, her voice steady now but filled with resolve. "I'll speak to the people. I'll show them that change is possible. But if this doesn't work, if it all falls apart—" Kale interrupted her, his expression unwavering. "If it falls apart, then you'll rebuild it. You'll learn from it and you'll do it better next time. But you won't be alone. You have allies now. You have people who believe in you." The queen nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, with people who would resist the change, people who would cling to the old ways. But she was no longer afraid of that. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense of possibility that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As they continued their walk through the district, the Queen's mind began to open to the idea of what could be. A new way of ruling, a new way of leading. It wasn't going to happen overnight. It was going to take time, effort, and trust. But it was possible, and that was enough. When they finally returned to the palace, the Queen felt different. There was a weight lifted from her shoulders, a sense of clarity that she hadn't felt in a long time. She had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time, she wasn't walking it alone. She had made a decision, and it was the right one. She was ready to face whatever came next. The Queen turned to her daughters, who had been silently watching her throughout the entire journey. Lyra stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Mother, what's happening? What have you decided?" The Queen took a deep breath and met her daughter's gaze. "I've decided that change is necessary. I'm going to trust in our people. I'm going to show them that we can build something better together. I need you to be with me to help me make this work." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, the Queen saw a flicker of hope in her daughter's gaze. It was a small thing, but it was enough. "We'll do it, Mother," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Together." The Queen nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The Queen stood at the balcony of the palace, gazing out at the city below. The golden spires of the capital stretched toward the sky, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the light of the setting sun. For a moment, the scene seemed peaceful, almost serene. But in her mind, a storm raged. The weight of the decisions she had made, the changes she had embraced, all of it was still new, still uncertain. Beside her, Cale stood silently, his presence a quiet reassurance. He had been by her side throughout the journey, offering advice when needed, but always allowing her the space to make her own choices. She had come to trust him in ways she never thought possible. His calm nature, his willingness to question the status quo, had helped her see beyond the walls she had built around herself. "You've made the right choice," Cale said softly, breaking the silence. "The people are ready for this. They're ready for change." The Queen didn't answer immediately. Her thoughts were still clouded with doubt, with the fear that everything might fall apart. She had no illusions about how difficult the path ahead would be. The people had lived under the weight of fear for so long. Breaking those chains would take time, patience, and more than a little courage. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said quietly, her voice betraying the uncertainty she had kept hidden for so long. "What if they don't accept me? What if they don't trust me?" Cale turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "They will. You've already taken the first step by acknowledging that things need to change. That alone will earn their respect, but you can't do it alone. You have to show them that you trust them, too." The Queen nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She had always believed in control, in commanding respect through fear. It was what had kept her empire strong, what had made her a leader in the eyes of the galaxy. But now she was learning that true strength came from something deeper, something more fragile, yet more enduring: trust. She turned her gaze back to the city, her eyes scanning the streets below. The people were gathering, moving through the squares, going about their daily lives. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to change. The Queen had decided to address them, to speak to them directly, to tell them the truth about the future she envisioned for them. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way forward. Her daughters stood behind her, Lyra and Saris both watching the scene unfold. They had been hesitant at first, unsure of what their mother's decision meant for them and their future. But as they saw the determination in her eyes, as they saw how much she was willing to sacrifice for the greater good, they began to understand. They began to see that their mother wasn't just the ruler of an empire anymore. She was becoming something more, something better. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet but firm. The Queen turned to her, her eyes softening. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time to give our people a choice, Lyra. It's time to build something that will last, something that will unite us all. I can't do this without you. I need your support. You've always been my strength, but now we need to be strong together." Lyra nodded, a flicker of pride in her eyes. Saris, the younger of the two, stepped forward, her face filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "We'll be with you, Mother. We believe in you." The Queen felt her heart swell at their words. For the first time in years, she felt as if she wasn't alone in this fight. She had her daughters by her side, and for all the challenges they would face them together. "I won't let you down," the queen said, her voice steady, "and I won't let them down either." The time had come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the queen made her way to the central square. The people had gathered, their faces filled with curiosity and anticipation. The atmosphere was tense, yet there was an air of expectation that hung over the crowd. They had lived under the shadow of the queen's rule for so long, and now they were about to hear from her directly. The queen stood on the balcony, the crowd before her silent and waiting. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had never done this before, never spoken directly to the people in this way. But now it was the only way forward. She raised her hand, signaling for silence, and then began to speak. "My people," the queen's voice rang out across the square. "For too long you have been ruled by fear. For too long I have kept you under my control, believing that it was the only way to protect you. I have kept you in a cage, and I have told myself that it was for your own good." There was a murmur among the crowd, some surprised by her words, others uncertain. The queen continued, her voice unwavering. "But I've realized something. I've realized that the only way to truly protect you, to ensure a future that is bright, that is full of hope, is to trust you. I've spent my life holding on to power, afraid that without it, we would fall into chaos. But I see now that power built on fear is fragile. It doesn't last, it doesn't create a future, it only holds us back." The queen paused, looking out at the faces before her. She saw confusion, skepticism, but she also saw something else, hope. They were listening. They were beginning to understand. "I want to build a future where we are united, not by fear, but by trust. I want to lead with you, not above you. I want to build an empire where each of you has a voice, where each of you has a part in shaping the future. This is not just my empire. This is our empire." There was a long pause, the crowd standing still, waiting for what would come next. The queen could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. Then a voice called out from the crowd. "Do you really mean it?" The queen nodded, her eyes meeting the speaker's. "Yes, I mean it. Together we will build something stronger than fear. We will build something that will last." A hush fell over the crowd, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. Then slowly the murmurs began. First one person clapped, then another, and another, until the entire square was filled with the sound of applause. It wasn't loud, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was real. The queen felt a surge of emotion welling up inside her. This was the beginning of something new. Something better. As the applause died down, the queen stepped back, her heart racing. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward a future built on trust. But it wasn't over. There was still much to be done, many challenges ahead. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. Cale stood beside her, watching the crowd with a quiet smile. "You did it," he said softly. The queen turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it." And for the first time in a long while, she felt as if she had finally found her place, not just as a ruler, but as a leader.